What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the VSO Gun Channel. It's great to be here as always. Happy Friday. I hope that you're having a great day. I know that I am. And today I wanted to talk about, obviously, the election has happened. Very likely, unless some other shenanigans happens, Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. J.D. Vance will be the vice president of the United States. Elon Musk will be going in to absolutely raid government alongside Ron Paul, and a whole bunch of other stuff is going to happen with RFK, Vivek, and Tulsi, and, you know, the list goes on and on and on, right? But what about the Second Amendment? What are the implications for the Second Amendment as it relates to the election results? And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. I want to explore what we know and what we can hope for after we hear a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by 1st Phorm. 1st Phorm is a pro-American, pro-freedom supplement company. You probably eat way too much crap and not enough protein. So 1st Phorm's mission is to put more protein in your face hole. Now, the thing that I've been using a whole lot lately are their meat sticks. Now, these things are a 20 gram of protein stick. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It doesn't have any like weird whey or any stuff like that. It is made out of meat. If you check them out using my link in the link tree or on the affiliates page, and that tells them that I sent you, and that helps out the channel. So special thanks to 1st Phorm for making today's video possible. So I've seen a lot of people excited online, and that's great. Of course, celebrate that we have a chance to enhance freedom in this country. But I see a lot of people excited and saying, yeah, now let's repeal the National Firearms Act. And while I appreciate the sentiment, and I 100% agree, I hate to bust your bubble, but it's probably not going to happen. We might get elements of that, and we'll speak to that here in a minute. But I guess what I want to say first is nothing that we're going to talk about here today happens if you go to sleep. Typically, our side of the aisle, which I really hate that term, but there's no real way to talk to this without saying it sort of that way, is identify, you know, our group, the hardworking Americans of the country, typically after elections like this, go back to their lives and don't really pay a whole lot of attention to politics. You cannot let that happen if you want some substantive change to be made, some headway to be made on Second Amendment issues, and for us to take some of that ground back. You have to activate once the administration takes power. And realistically speaking, that kind of power is only really guaranteed as 2 years, right? Now, it might get better after 2 years. It might get worse. So it's one of the reasons I've waited a couple days to make this video. I was really hoping that we were going to have confirmation that they had retaken the House. I do believe that the House will go red, but I think it will be sort of a thin margin. And as far as power is concerned, we have to remember that the presidency is not the end-all be-all. The presidency is important, but you have to have the consent of the governed, which is the way that it's built. You have to have the Senate and the House go along with whatever agenda item it is. We do not have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. And those of you who are like, we should just get rid of the filibuster, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't just change the rules of government to make them work for you. Once you start doing that sort of stuff, you might as well be called a Democrat. And I don't consider myself a Republican. But anyway, wrestling controls of all house of government does help. But you also have to remember that firearms issues are only one of the columns. There's lots of other stuff they've talked about doing, and there's going to be major fights over a lot of that sort of stuff. So in order to make those issues rise to the top or gravitate towards the top end of things, you are going to have to be loud and vocal, and we're going to have to do stuff. Now, the good news is I do hear tell from my sources that the Gun Owners of America is going to be playing a pivotal role in policy as it relates to that, and that's a good thing. That's the kind of group that we want. We have had some problems in the past with this particular executive listening to the National Rifle Association, which is basically the window licker of firearms rights organizations. There's really three things that I think that could possibly happen. Let's talk about the first, which is probably the most likely, which is the corrections of some of the overreach of the previous administration. And that's because that's pretty easy for them to do, because most of the stuff that they did was just a wave of the president's pen type thing. So they probably eliminate the office, the White House Office of Gun Control. That's probably gone. But it is my sincere hope that they actually don't correct any of the big three problems with the ATF: the pistol brace rule, the frame and receivers rule, and the engage in the business rule. In my opinion, I think that we're in pretty good shape on all of those as far as our court battles are concerned, and I hope that they leave those alone where they are, because we would like an opportunity for somebody like Clarence Thomas to get his teeth in those and set some pretty good precedent. Court cases are mooted by the president coming in and rescinding or telling them to back off, then that eliminates the opportunity for some really juicy precedent to be set that could potentially lead into some of the stuff that we would talk about with the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act. So if they leave those alone, those court cases go through and we win, then that's all great. If we lose, then, well, the president can go in and just rescind the order, right? And say, nah, no more. So it's like one of those situations like, hey, don't touch it, let it do its thing, and then if it looks like it's going south, then you rescind it type thing. So that's number one, is correcting the previous perpetrations of the previous administration. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the National Firearms Act and Gun Control Act stuff. I think that it's probably a pretty good sizable pill to swallow to get the Congress say, all right, yeah, machine guns for everybody. The FUD-tastical people in Congress are not going to go for that. All right. However, there are some piecemeal things that I think are relatively low-hanging fruit. The first is suppressors. Last time they were in office, they had all the votes to get the Shush Act through. And that was, I think it was the ball field shooting. Imagine that. On the eve of something like that being voted on, there's a catastrophe. That's not a coincidence whatsoever, is it? Right? We've been able to really enhance the information that's out there on suppressors and how they should not be treated as an arm, and they should not be regulated. They're a piece of safety equipment. They're a piece of PPE that attaches to your rifle. So the concept that they are treated this way is absolutely asinine. So I think that one's actually relatively easy, provided that you guys are vocal about it and can get that one to rise to the top. Short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, maybe a little bit more challenging, but we do also have some court precedent where they're basically talking about this sort of thing, and they're like, well, wait a minute. This whole thing about them being concealable and therefore more deadly is kind of bullshit. That's considerably easier than, hey, everybody gets a grenade launcher and everybody gets a machine gun type thing. So I want to meter those expectations there. And once you've made those inroads and you've gutted like the real basis by which the National Firearms Act kind of operates, the whole money scheme underneath of it, which is suppressors and short barrel rifles, let's be honest here, then I think that in relative short order, in comparison of the 100 or so years that we've been living under this tyranny, I think that those fall off later, the machine gun and dangerous ordnance regulations. And then the third thing that I think is actually really, really easy and absolutely gets done, because we've heard the man himself actually even talk about it, which is the national reciprocity thing. The elimination of the concept that you have a right to a God-given inalienable right enshrined in our Constitution, but it has limits at some arbitrary state border. Getting rid of the concept that you have to have a permit from this state and that state, and the crosstalk communication. Like, the government is supposed to protect the rights of the people. And in this instance, we have a gross overreach of state power in many instances where the states will not work with each other to provide accommodation for their citizens being able to protect themselves. I'm looking at you, New York and California. right? Maryland, and, you know, there's a few other in there. That's kind of bullshit, and that should just kind of go away. If you can legally possess a firearm, then you can protect yourself with it. It does not matter where you are standing inside the United States. Those are the things that I think about happening when it comes to the Second Amendment, and there might be a few other things, but I don't think that they're likely going to make it up to the point of getting done in the next 2 years. After the midterm elections, maybe there's a situation that could happen with those, but there's a lot to be done in this administration in the next couple years. And if we get those things, or even a couple of those things, then I'll be a happy camper. Oh, and one more thing in closing. Very likely, Donald Trump will appoint 2, if not 3, Supreme Court justices. I fully expect that somewhere during this administration, Clarence Thomas will see the writing on the wall and say, hey, you know, I'm pretty old. It's time for me to get out of here. I think Alito probably do the same thing and will want to be replaced by someone of similar capacities, both of them. However, the other one that I don't think a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to is Sotomayor is not a very healthy person. And to clarify, I mean that she might choose to retire. There's really the capacity for 3 Supreme Court justices. And oh boy, wouldn't there be some tears on that one?